suspension trainer. Okay? This one's set up wrong. This one's set up wrong. Okay? Because when we use it this way, it will slide right off the rod. Okay? The way you set them up is you roll it over so it self-tightens around the pull bar. It also pulls the pinch right off the pull bar. Okay, does that make sense? Another way I see coaches setting this up, which is even more wrong, is they do this thing. Okay? This is even more wrong. We never want to have a brace of a carabiner like this. Okay? So what you do is you wrap this around and you slide this through so it self-tightens and now it won't move around on you. Okay, that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Goes into the next question of how high the handle should be, right? Generally the standard is 8 feet. That's how high your clips are. If you change the height of the clip, you wind up changing the heights of all these kind of presets. And these presets are helpful for knowing what kind of exercise you're doing. Does that make sense? Okay. So here, I'm on level 2, right? There's 2, there's 1, and then there's 3. Different exercises should be done at different distances. And another kind of general point of how to use these things is how to adjust them. When you see this kind of abrasions on here, that's from coaches improperly adjusting them, forcing it through the clip. It doesn't take a lot of force. You can use 2 fingers. You hold the clip down and you pull down, and it will come down. Go the other way, you pull the strap up. It's really that simple, but there's just a technique to moving them. So far, so good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have a couple different kinds of trainers here, right? We have the suspension trainer from Teawrex, we have the jungle gym trainer, we have the cross core, and we have the Olympic rings. There's different things you can do with them. One of the things you need to explain to clients, with the Trx, we don't do any kind of sawing motion, right? There's none of this going on. The whole point of that is to force the client to stabilize. If you want to use a sawing motion for flutter kicks or whatever, that's what the cross core or the pulleys are for. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. The most common mistake I see coaches making is not setting the height correctly. All exercises have a specific height they're supposed to be. There isn't a fixed rule. It does depend on the exercise, but there are some generalities for that. If you're doing a movement that's in a plank position, okay, it's usually going to be the low position, which is about here. The actual height is what is mid-calf from the stirrup, right? So the mid-calf. Taller people, their mid-calf's higher, their arms are longer, and it balances out. If you go lower, it's harder. If you come up higher, it's easier relative to the core, right? The higher you up, the higher your angle, the more focus is on your shoulders and your arms, right? We don't, when we're doing plank movements, we're really looking more at core function for that, okay? Same thing for movements that are in a supinated position. If I'm lying down, I have my heels in. Now, I've seen lots of coaches set up their clients without explaining to them how to get into these positions, right? How do I get into either the pronated position or the supinated position, right? Or even do it incorrectly. So I'm going to go over those because I see that mistake a lot. Okay? Here's how you get in, and you need to show them because they'll do everything other than that. Okay? We hold these up like stinky socks. One foot goes in, other foot goes in, and we turn over. Okay? And now we're in the plank. If we're doing a posterior move, our setup looks as follows. Heel goes here, and this comes here. I see this thing going on a lot too, where we're getting torque in the ankle. Make sure your foot's on the handle. And this is our supinated position if we want to do hamstring curls or glute bridges or whatever. Okay? You can wear shoes or not wear shoes, it works with both of them. Any questions on this so far?
I think the biggest challenge I've run into is when people with smaller feet, and for them to get in there, I guess, a little more comfortably. Would you recommend them perhaps going barefoot so they can use their toes to sort of get on the handle a little more comfortably?
If a person has,
or bring the
this person has really big feet or very little feet, I would use the cross core because the handle size is adjustable,
okay.
Or the jungle gym trainer, which has a better cradle mechanism. The Trx's cradle mechanism is the weakest of the three of them. All right, any other questions? So, one thing to do when we're working with suspension trainers is make sure you tell them what their points of performance are and you're very careful with them. When we're dealing with a movement that's in a pronated position, it's midline stability and it's protracted shoulders, okay? It is straight elbows, okay? Very frequently, coaches will put too challenging of move. This is a hard move for most people to do. So you want to regress them to either using a BOSU or just the step 360 or just the floor, if that's all that they're able to do. The Teawrex suspension trainer programming always works on time-based, pretty much invariably, at their kind of headquarters level. And the reason for that is if you do the movements faster, you tend to degrade performance on the exercise, right? It's much like bodybuilding. Going faster is not the point, it's maintaining time under tension. And so usually you use time in most of the workouts. You'll see I write it as 45 seconds or a minute. That's really the idea. You of course need to scale the movements according to a client's strength. If a client can't hold the position, right, for that long, there are easier variants where you go to a non-Trx type movement. The jungle gym trainer is slightly easier, and then the step 3 cross core 180 is slightly harder, right? And you can make your scalings that way. Don't scale the height of the trainer, there's a proper height. It's too hard, it's too hard. Any questions on that? Okay, one handle mode and how to use that, because that comes up in a lot of things. It's important that you do it correctly, because if you don't do it correctly, it'll come out and it'll destabilize the person while working, right? So here's how you do it. We got our two handles, right? We go through the center. We go through the center again. And we hold the bottom, okay? And it makes this kind of double layer. And this is an important pattern, like a knot, to know what it looks like. This is a safe position. It's not going to come out. If I hold this one, it will come out. Have to hold the bottom handle. And this is used for one-hand movements that we might need. Depending on the client's weight, can you get away without using the one-handle mode? Teawrex recommends not doing that based on their own testing, right? Trying to just pull on one. It essentially pulls on this assembly, which is not rated that high and it wears out. And so that's why they recommend using the two-handle mode. I see some coaches doing this kind of thing where they have a client hold both handles. That is too big for anybody who's under 6'5" to do. I think you could probably get away with holding the stirrups, though that would probably work. If you want to use one-hand mode, we have other equipment. Always remember, use the best equipment for the job. Teawrex is not great for one-hand mode anything, right? Rings are really good, right? Rings don't move, right? They're really good in the jungle gym, also as a one piece. If your exercise has a lot of one-arm movements that you want to use, this is a weaker tool. The cross-core 180 is even worse, right? So use the right tool, make your job easier, because sometimes clients don't listen to you. Okay, any questions on one-hand mode and when to use it? Okay, so what about other heights other than pronated and supinated positions, right? If you're working movements like rows, presses, tricep extensions, bicep curls, gorilla curls, so on and so forth, they're generally always at level 2. Okay? That is pretty much the default for all those kind of movements. I see this position a lot on rows. Okay, this is what I see all the time. Robin's laughing, but if coach is here, I see clients allowing this. Robin, please tell me what's wrong with this.
First of all, they're not maintaining the vector. They're sitting into the movement and they're dropping their shoulders, they're rounding it back, and the roll is supposed to be a vector from your shoulders down to your ankles. Maintaining core integrity as well.
Those are all right, but let's go, why is that bad? That's all the right answers. Those are kind of the analytical parts of it, but why is this a big deal?
Because you're creating an injury, first of all.
Where?
In the spine.
What part of the spine?
The thoracic and the lumbar.
Yes, thoracic, lumbar not so much, it's unloaded, but the thoracic's not, right? So on a row, for example, we want to maintain our positioning, right? The other fault, you're supposed to be on your heels on this movement, right? You can't do it from your feet. As soon as you go on your feet, you're going to collapse the position. Use a pad or a mat if there's bothering your heels, right? You also removing the midline stability of this movement, which is the reason we're doing suspension training. So let me say that again. Why do we do suspension training for? To work the core. There is no other reason to use a suspension trainer other than to work the core. It's all core all the time. But what about the bicep curl, whatever? If you want to work biceps, use dumbbells, right? It is never the best tool to use for strength training other than core, and for core it's great. The only other exception for that is a Teawrex really makes a good scaling tool and a good stretching tool. More often than not though, the exercise band is a better tool to use for helping movement patterns. And it's because I'll have a client, for example, do an assisted squat, right? And I'll see this, right? And oh yeah, I'm squatting. And this is a great squat? No, because it doesn't scale, right? You're reinforcing a bad pattern. Brian, have you seen any coaches allow clients to do that squat? You have, yes. Why? Lazy coaching. There's no other reason for it. So, what do we want to do to help that pattern? There's 2 things you can do. You can use the mini bands and put that in the center of the assembly, which allows the band to stretch, so they have to support their weight, or you can just use an exercise band. There are some movements, for example, like the pistol squat that they'll use it for. Generally, you want the client supporting some of its body weight and maintaining balance in the position. If you're doing a unilateral movement, like your skater lunge or whatever, the whole point of the movement is to teach the stability function. It's not a strength move, it's a balance movement. If you take all the balance out of it, it's not that helpful. So while you can use it, just remember maybe I do this to warm up some of the patterns, but I want to try to progress the client to hold some of their own weight, because that's the whole point of it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right. What else do we got on the Trx to go over?
Can you go over one more time about the band looped around?
Yeah, so you can we have mini bands downstairs, and you can use another clip and put the mini band essentially in the center of the assembly, like the green ones, right? And then it would sit here, and then it's going to have some movement by the band.
Okay. So that's when you're trying to get the person to just keep their back more upright?
Yeah, so because if they lean too much, the band's going to stretch.
Oh, right, okay. So
Right.
it doesn't
So
fix
basically,
the back.
if you're not using this kind of band, you do the same thing. You use this as basically your extender strap, right, from a pull apart. Alright, so now we're essentially too low now, right? So I'd have to adjust that, or maybe double up on this. And since we're doubling up, that's about the right height. This has a lot of stretch, but even here, now I'm gonna have to take some more of my own weight, right? Which is kind of the thing that you're trying to build. It scales, right? As they get stronger, you can give them a thinner and thinner band so they don't actually need it. this is only used for scaling body weight movements, right? We're not gonna use this for any other type of exercise, right? If a client can do pistol squats, then they don't need to bend at all. Make sense? All right. The Trx push-up, which is used a lot, is from down here, feet are in the stirrups, hands are on the floor, okay? This is a Teawrex chest press. Okay, it is a fairly useless move. Why? Well, it works the core a little bit. However, I can just kind of move my hips back to offset that. Dumbbells work better for that kind of chest press, and so does exercise tubing, and so does a functional trainer. If I only have a TRX and I'm out in, I don't know, Vietnam, okay, you know, something, it's good. It's not that powerful of a move, it doesn't scale that well. So that's why I don't really use it that much. Another movement we use a lot is the rollout, right? I almost never use a high rollout, which is what I see a lot of coaches using. Okay, the high rollout, again, we're going to be at 2 since it's a midline move, would look like this. Okay, whereas usually the rollout that we would use is a low rollout. And why not use a high rollout? It requires maintaining the hollow position at a high strength that most clients cannot hold. If you release the hollow while under load, you will hurt your spine, for sure. The risk of injury is too high for that to be a worthwhile movement. That's really the only reason I don't use it. If a client has enough strength to do that, make them do toes to bar. There's plenty of other safer exercises to do than that one. Everybody with me so far? Mm-hmm. Okay. Flavia was asking me about a lot of the kind of different pronated movements from like the pot stirrer and the knee sweeps and all these other things. There's just different names for basically different leg patterns, right? I'll go over a few of them. It's a question of just looking in the manual, TRX's manual, to see which ones are which. Some of them are harder than others. So your knee sweep, now you notice the first thing when I'm going to go into a knee sweep, I'm moving backwards, right? Because I need to have enough range to get into my knee, essentially. If I walk all the way forwards, I won't be able to get up enough, and then you'll have an incomplete range of motion. I've seen some mistakes on what the atomic push-up is too. The atomic push-up is it's kind of like a crunch and then a push-up. So knees come in, maintain core, and repeat. Okay, there's no pike in the atomic push-up, although you could add it to make it more difficult. Since we're talking about the pike, let's see where to go from the camera here. I see this a lot on the pike. Okay? Pike just straight knees, hips come up. It's designed as a regression for the handstand. So they need to keep knees straight on that movement. Your pot stirrer, which we use a lot, just circles through. Any questions so far on any of those? Let's see what other movements we use a lot. The inverted row. That's going to be high attachment point. Pulling up to the stirrups and back down. As a corrective tool, the Teawrex is really powerful for working hamstring because you're a hard muscle to work. The glute bridge, the hamstring curls, and things like that are pretty powerful. I'm going to show you some different variations that you can do with them. Again, I want this at mid-calf since I'm laying down. Lots of clients have weak hamstrings. If you notice that, put it in their book. Weak hamstrings require a lot of time to strengthen, and this is an easy exercise to use. So we can lift up our hips and then alternate. Notice the Teawrex doesn't move. We can pull our knees in, get a little closer, and then lift up into a glute bridge, or we can do them together. We can curl and lift into a hip rise. Okay? All these are really good variations of each other. The most complex move on the Teawrex is the handstand and the bob and weave, I think. Let me show you how those work and when you should use them. So the bob and weave is the only movement for the Teawrex that requires a center assembly like this. All the other movements can be done off the pull bar, which is easier. The bob and weave is a regression for the muscle up. Okay? And I may need to raise this up actually a little bit. Bring that up for me a little bit, Ron. Maybe like 3. Yeah. I can also make if I want to make the straps higher past this part, I can hold here and it'll still go higher. I could also have done that. So we're going to start here in a kind of a high vector row, come down, and we're going to hit our muscle up as we transition into the high rollout. Okay? Notice I keep my elbows very close to my sides like I'm supposed to on a muscle up. It takes a lot of strength to execute that movement, to break it down into pieces. Don't allow them to do movements that could cause shoulder injury. It's a high movement, high velocity, changing weight movement, so it's dangerous if you don't do it correctly. Trx handstand.
Such a good move.
What's that?
That looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's cool.
Nice.
Yeah, maybe lower a little bit. I don't know if that's actually a real movement or not. I kind of needed the bottom weight myself, but I think it's a real movement. It wasn't my certification. I was in Jamaica and I wanted to do Trx or muscle ups, and that's what I came up with. All right. But I have seen some people doing it on YouTube too, so there's that. The handstand. This is like a wall handstand, right? The way to do it is with one foot in the cradles. And then from here, you just push back and you walk up your handstands. So on and so forth. You can roll out of here and your foot will come out of the stirrup. If you cannot execute a handstand, don't coach handstands, okay? Stay within your knowledge base, okay? What is a handstand? It is a tricep, shoulder, and core move. So if you can't demonstrate it safely, don't do it. can also use a wall for that too. There is the Bulgarian Lunge and the Teawrex Burpee. The Bulgarian Lunge is probably the better of the two moves in terms of usefulness. Requires a lot of balance and the right positioning. You have to be ahead, and then we just slide down. It's essentially a regression of the skater lunge. The Trx Burpee is similar. We're going to bring our hands down, flip matches, come back up and repeat. Any questions on those?
That makes sense. I did have one question though, actually, with the hamstring stuff. Because one issue I've kind of run into with people is they have a tendency to pull higher up. And what I've been cueing them to do is to focus on not pointing the toes as much, but trying to just pull the heel.
They're pulling. So, if you're working hamstrings, clients will usually recruit from different areas if their hamstrings not working. I've seen calves, and it's more often quads. You need to make it easier, or you need to do an activation drill in order to get it to work.
Okay.
There is no point in letting a client exercise if they're not hitting the right muscle. They're just making the imbalance worse, and they're creating a risk for injury. When I train with clients, I always ask them, I don't tell them the answer, I say, well, where do you feel this? If they give me the wrong answer, that's a cue that there's a movement problem. On the Trx, hamstring curls are high intensity, so you want to check in with them and make sure that they're pulling from the right place. They'll often ask me, why are you asking this stupid question? Of course there's my hamstrings. Well, the last two people didn't feel it there, that's why we asked.
At least you know they're doing it right.
Yes, that's good. It's supposed to burn your hand, that's what I tell them. Any other questions?
Can you,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
can you demonstrate the gorilla curl?
The
Because
gorilla
that's in
curl.
our program, and
Yeah.
that was actually a couple.
Yeah, gorilla curl. I think this has another name. I think it's also called the clutch curl.
Yeah. I like a gorilla curl. It's not so much first. Clutch sounds like first.
More intimidating.
Yeah, clutch sounds like first.
So we're just here, pulling in. Okay, that's all that it is. It gets hard on these high amount of time because the arms are basically staying in a working the time. It's an alternating curl and row essentially.
No, that's a separate one in itself, because a clutch curl is different. It's here.
Yeah, the clutch curl, Clutch curl, slight variation. It's coming into here. Okay, here we're just moving the hands up. That's really the only difference. Anything else?
So, an alternative to moving this up to level 2, can you move this up to level 2? I guess if you have the choice to do this, why not do that? Right? I just want to make sure that
They don't teach it that way.
so you could also do that.
I think it would work, but that's not the way they teach you to use the training.
You see that second, the other position you were just showing, where you pull it up to make it shorter, a lot when you're trying to do like, pulls.
Yeah.
And,
And something like generally, using something like rings when you're overhead is going to be better than the Teawrex trainer in that. And the jungle gym trainer also is really good in that kind of high or low.
So you can like put your elbows. You can put your elbows.
They do some kind of pull-ups, L holds, toes to bar, using it basically as rings. What else? I think that's the primary movements. There are different types of core movements we can do from a sit-up position. Basically, the point of those is to take the hip flexors out of the sit-up, right, where we put our feet in a cradle and force them to push down. Ultimately, it's about looking at faults and making sure that their lines stay even. One of the things we should always do with the Trx trainer is size it. Before you have the client do it, make sure that you're at the right vectors, because if the height's different, that can change how far it is. This way that they get the right amount of loading.
So then with something like the Unbroken, I think it's called Unbroken, the transformation series. It's just not the Unbroken.
Forfeit.
Double unders and the jump rope. Yeah, and one of them where you're kind of doing a bunch of what you demonstrated just now. So it's time with attention is the main focus here, right? So for those, so just one way that you can scale it would not be how many you can do within 30 seconds, because a lot of them are 30-second intervals. It would just be,
I would most likely decrease the interval length, right? For all the movements, there are minor points of execution, so you still need to know them, such as on that workout, the side plank, right? And then the progressions from that. So side plank is going to be mid calf height. Right, after a low side plank, with their feet split apart. Okay, as opposed to coming up here, I see this a lot. This doesn't really work anything. If you want to do a stacked side plank, just do it on a BOSU. This is where clients will want to gravitate to because it's easier. Can make sure their feet are nice and even. If you want to make it harder on the cross core 180, this is a challenging movement. You can even have them scissor their legs, that's even harder.
but it's okay to keep it stacked if they can do a TRX side plank to regress the split side.
No,
No?
that's,
So,
no, there is no such movement where your feet are stacked
yeah.
on the TRX. It should be done on a BOSU if they can't maintain the position.
Okay.
It's just reinforcing bad patterns. The whole point of it is the stability of the movement, and actually on the TRX side plank to work the adductors, but you can't work if your feet are stacked. Any other questions?
And if the exercise continuously calls for TRX, so it's fine to kind of throw in the BOSU in the middle.
Yeah, you can swap it out. Just be careful from if you one of the reasons when we build programs the way it is something called transition time. If I have a client coming in and out of TRX, I'm going to break the transition timing that's in the workout. Right? But on core fit, the first interval is 2.5 minutes of work. There's no break inside. I see coaches doing that too. They're adding like a break. Doesn't say rest. You just keep going. So if they cannot do that, you're scaling too hard. Better choice than adding in breaks into this is to reduce the load. Right? So either reduce the amount of time per movement or scale it down to a BOSU. They should be able to finish, it's like 4 or 5 rounds. They should be able to finish the first 2 without coming down to the knees, otherwise you have to make it easier.
Is there any difference between TRX Natok and TRX Crunch? Because
No.
you saw the.
TRX Crunch is the real name for a Natok.
Okay.
There really is no TRX Natok. That's what they call a crunch. I don't know why. It doesn't look like a crunch to me. It looks like a Natok, but that's what it is.
Okay.
You can also use the GHR roller to hit a lot of those movements as well.
Like the bikes, if you can't get it up there.
Pikes, Natoks, hamstring curl, it's a little bit easier with the roller.
Can you, just go over the correct position in TRX, because I see that a lot too, with the vectors, or if it's attached to a bar, you're supposed to be underneath, and you're not.
So there's some principles that you apply for that, right? Let's take a movement. Let's take a movement like a one-arm rollout. So since I'm going to do a one-arm rollout, I've got to put it into one handle mode. And right away, we're going to see this question about vectors come up on this one, right? Where should I be relative to the anchor point? Comes up right away. And the answer comes on the loading that I want. If I want to increase loading, and it's a behind the anchor point movement, I move back. This is going to be harder, but this is going to be easier, right? That changes my vector. Same thing if I turn this into a row. Alright, so this is a shallow vector. If If I want to make it harder, I keep my hand where it is and I walk my feet forward to make this harder. One of the things with coaches who are really good with Trx is not only does it work core, it works stability, right? So let's take a movement. I'm going to do 2 hand rows. I don't feel like working that hard.
And grip too, right?
What's that?
And grip strength.
It does. I don't think it's really designed for it. So let's say I'm doing a movement like a row, right? This is easier to stabilize. This is harder. This still gets harder even more. And so by changing our feet position, we can make the movement easier or harder to stabilize. For example, a movement like our oblique crunch, right, where I'm here and I'm coming out. This is going to make this movement more difficult. Where having my feet together makes it easier because I can essentially activate my adductors of my other leg. Especially on the cross core, feet position makes a big difference in how hard a movement is. They cover that a lot in certification, all the different variations and how to stack your feet and things like that. You can use a Teawrex. There's a lot of good stretches that you can do with them as well. The ones I use the most. So I'll use this one, which you use in yoga a lot too, to open up the shoulders. You can open up the overhead position. It's on the wrists. You can stretch the QL. I can stretch latissimus the same way, just by rotating up. I can stretch all the shoulders. If I want to hit hips and QL together, a lot of your mobility WOD movements that work with bands will also work with Trx if you position them in the right way. For example,
Like that one just you did, because you can do the band distraction.
Sure.
That's right.
or if I change it from a high anchor to a wall anchor, and now I can do like a banded bully, essentially. And stretch my shoulder that way if I needed to. Some moves work better with bands because the movement's helpful. Some movements are actually better with a satin piece.
So you were saying that the press with the Trx was useless, even though it calls for it and some of the exercises, or is that just for stability purposes? Because maybe to some people it's just enough instability that they need to really work the core.
Well, it's probably not going to work the core. That's the reality of that movement, right? So our chest press, right? And this is a good movement where our feet position can change the loading, right? Out here, I don't have much stability really required. When I come here, there's a lot more. Or if I even hold with one foot. What you usually find with this movement is it turns into mostly a shoulders movement, right? And it's a shoulders movement under body weight. Think of it this way. The person who's using this, who's acne conditioned, that's how they would do a push-up. If we need to build up their strength in their shoulders, probably dumbbells would be a better choice. You can more carefully control the load, the less injury risk of them coming out of position. Yes, it does work core a little bit, but it's too many things for them to control. What you'll wind up seeing is this push-up. We've all seen that. Oh yeah, I got this all day. Oh, this is hard, right? That's what you see, and because they don't understand. Well, why would I want to move my hips? That makes it harder. Right? They don't understand it.
Right.
So the low rollout does use that kind of core function. There's different ways that you can use the Teawrex to create that kind of, if I wanted to walk out, for example, so I can come here for my high rollout, right? If I wanted to work core, I can just have them step back till they find load. Okay? This is going to be better for creating core work than the push-up is going to be. Push-up progressions, honestly, I'll use a hip-supported band if core is weak on it. A lot of times, though, you want to just find, if it's shoulders, if it's triceps, if it's core, and work the weak link to get those up. And usually they'll come automatically if you get all three pieces. Usually it's one of the three that's lacking.
Okay.
Any other questions?
For the squats, I see that there are usually two schools. So people that do the squats with their arms stretched out all the way, always, and people who only do exclusively squat rows because they say that the legs and hips patterns is more.
So if we're gonna, good question. So let's say we decide, for whatever reason, that we need to use the Teawrex for squats, right?
Or pistol squats.
Or even regular squats, right? And we went over the reasons why it's not such a good piece of equipment. It's not that you can't use it. Sometimes when you're programming, maybe there are some things that are slowing down the program. You have to make decisions, right? It's not like you're going to injure somebody using a Teawrex. It's just maybe not necessarily the best tool. But if we are going to use it, right, where do our hands go? You start your hands close to your shoulders. And the reason we do that is so that we have room to open to maintain tension. Okay? And if I do it this way, right, I have my weight on my feet where it belongs, and it becomes a real closed chain exercise like it's supposed to. Whereas, for example, the overhead squat on the Trx. Something wrong. That's this way. No. Hands are out here. Squat down. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. With a pistol, I don't like the Teawrex with a pistol. It doesn't scale. It's kind of like why I don't like butterfly pull-ups. You notice we don't have butterfly pull-ups in any of our programming? It's not a progression to anything. If you want to teach a client how to do pistols, and you tell me, what do we want to look for if somebody should be even doing pistols? Where do we start?
On one leg.
Leg strength.
For leg strength.
The
Stability in the lunge.
Mobility.
What part of mobility?
ankle.
Well, hips and ankle. Yeah.
Dorsiflexion. How do I test if I have a requisite amount of dorsiflexion to do a pistol?
Test it. You can do your plate from the stretch to see that mobility.
Okay, test me.
I would see if you have like maybe you require with a plate while you step on it. Like somebody.
You may know another test than I know. Well, go ahead.
Well, it's not a test. It's just basically to see.
It's looking like a complicated test, right?
It's if we were gonna do a discussion with the dam
Okay.
from here, we'll see if go from forward. We'll see if we have movement. So from just this part, you do have a little bit of stretch on your ankle.
I do.
Yeah.
Can I do a pistol?
Well, I would also include like a little bit of a wedge in behind your heel to help you get to that.
Let me show you an
that
easier
motion.
method. This almost has some discretion. I'm going to Robin demonstrate. Can you do pistol, Robin?
I can, I don't know if I can do it right now.
You don't have to do it right now. This is an easy exercise.
Okay.
Okay. Put your feet together, stack them together. Squat down as far as you can.
Hands up or down?
Hands up wherever you like. Okay. Can you get your butt down parallel? Bring your chest up if you can. Okay. Robin doesn't have tremendous ankle mobility. Okay. She cannot do a pistol with good form, maybe, unless she can break parallel with
2 feet.
because it's the same position, the ankle doesn't change. That's your test. If you can't get lower than your hips with your butt, you get into a pistol. That's simple.
I would have been in the test since I did leg, gluten leg work yesterday.
Okay. If you want to work pistols, the box pistol is pretty much your best choice for that. Can't guarantee it's going to look pretty for me because I'm not warmed up and I'm not good at pistols either. But basically you come underneath and you step up and you come down.
That does not terrible. I wish your VMO a lot too.
What's that?
I wish your VMO a lot.
It does. And you have to be careful that this is where you're looking for sufficient amount of strength. If I wanted to use a Teawrex to add some stability to that, I could, so that they can control the loading essentially. Right. And this kind of use of the Teawrex where, well, I'm feeling it too much in my knee and I can push down on it. This is a good use for it, so you can self-scale and cause any pain in the meniscus or wherever else it might be in the knee. Any other questions? Ed, what about you, Flavio? Any questions?
No, I think I'm good.
Do the movements that you see, because there's little details, every single movement has small details of where it's supposed to be. Usually you can feel if patterns are not right. The biggest source of problems are shoulders in the wrong position, right? That they're either on rows and things it's not controlling the shoulders, or you're relaxing them, right, with this broken position and like a push-up position, and not maintaining midline stability. Those are really your biggest faults. And always keep in mind, Teawrex is generally like a bodybuilding movement. It's all about time range of tension, which is why you see this high volume on most of the movements. That's really how it works.
So a really quick one, last question in the same, I think, transformation series, the one that you have a quarter to half squat on the medicine ball and then rows. So because you're kind of changing the depth of the squat, is still the Trx the best tool to use since you kind of
For that,
yeah. When you, I believe it doesn't specify.
it's
what
with,
to
yeah,
use.
you'd use exercise tubing for that
Is
one.
that what it calls for it? Okay. I please I remember that is what it calls
Most
for.
exercise,
Okay,
yeah,
Oh,
most
yeah, that's the tubing.
Most Trx moves can also be done with exercise tubing. Exercise tubing works really well because it only stretches so far when it comes to support, right? So that particular movement you're talking about, is you hold the low row, and we row, and that last move is just coming down to half, quarter, half. Classic body-building combination, creating tension.
So that's just like that.
Use a Teawrex to put all the weight in Teawrex, and it won't work.
It's hard to do the row from that position too.
It doesn't really
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, you can't do it because of the distance. You actually do that out of the spin.
That's it, that I learned in my 16-hour certification of Teawrex. That's pretty much the highlights. That's most of what it is. They went through all the nitty-gritty on each one of the individual movements. You just have to look them up as to where positioning is. And
Yeah. A lot of them also you need a lot of room, you know.
you do.
You can't
Especially
do
if you're using this particular setup takes a ton of space. The higher the ceiling, the more space it takes up. They went over a lot of details on the programming, which was a big part of their certification too. Good?
Yep.
All right. Do you have any other questions? We really did this one to teach you how to do it.